So we're gonna blame this bastard.
Yes.
And single one guy out. That's pretty much how it's got to work. I can't play. Okay, we're gonna get going on the show here, but I can't play FIFA. That's why I can't, because those kids spend 21 hours on it, and then they kick my ass every time I try to log on.
Right, you don't want to play competitive.
No,
multiplayer.
it sucks. Yeah, although I play
Now,
and then.
Speaking of studies, I did read a study recently that said that you are a lot less likely to enjoy competitive multiplayer the older you get. Which I've certainly found to be true.
Can we hit record?
I'm not nearly as good as it is at it as he used to be.
All right, we better get going on this. Hello, everyone, tuning in. This is Close to the Metal, our weekly show where we sit here and we talk about computing. We go in depth on usually one topic. We've got several different episodes, quite a few that you can go and check in the back catalogs. I'm your host, Greg Nibbler, and we're going to talk to our panel here in just a second. But today we're going to be talking about GPU cards and why they seem to be so expensive and hard to find for some reason in this day and age. And we're going to go in depth with this, but let's meet who we're joined here by today, and that is to my right.
I'm Brad Burke.
You are Brad Burke. Indeed.
Yep.
I just wanted to repeat that back to make sure that was
thanks,
clear. All right, and on the end.
And I am a Matt Smith.
You are a Matt Smith,
Yes.
the Matt Smith we were able to acquire for today's
Yes.
show. Okay, so let's get into this, you guys. And it is a thing. You know, we've done several different reviews of GPU cards and just kind of where they're at. You know, as the new ones come out. But it does seem to be a constant issue of they're either really hard to find, or if you can find them, they seem to be really expensive or more than what the MSRP is. And we've kind of got the GTX 1060 here for maybe an example just to start off with. This was, I think we have the review unit right here. I don't know, Brad, which two do we have here?
Yeah, so here we have the GTX 1060 from Zotac. This is a add-in board partner card with a custom cooler and a bit of an overclock. Not too much, I think it's like 100, 110 megs, something like that. So, and then we also have a reference RX 480. I think it's reference, 8 gig version.
Yeah.
So we have test results for both of these. Spent about, a couple days, just got this 1060 in, so finally adding that to our test suite.
Okay, all right. And so the performance on this, I don't know if we want to go too far into the 1060 right now. Matt, do you have any?
Yeah, and Brad can go ahead and talk about performance.
They're pretty comparable, actually. Like in most games we found, I would say that both cards are very capable at 1080p, and even at 1440p, both of them handle, not the newest games, but kind of, last generation games quite well. 60 frames per second in Battlefield 4 at 1440p with the settings cranked up. Deus Ex, obviously, a new game in our test suite, is super demanding. But it pulled off, 25 frames per second. The 1060 did at Ultra, 1440p. So they're pretty strong offerings. I think most people use 1080p screens, and I think they're going to be very happy with either card.
Okay.
Yeah, these are the mid-range cards.
The mid-range offerings,
which
that
we
are
talked
out there.
about in the past with the RX 480, and we did a review of that on the podcast. Like, these are the cards that are supposed to be able to do most things and do them affordably. And certainly with the GTX 1060, this review will be coming out probably later in the week on the site, and mission accomplished in that regard.
So
just like with the RX 480, they're both very capable, even up to 1440p if you don't mind. Dipping down the high detail, in a game like.
But to the casual to gamer, I mean, would definitely satisfy
and if you play something like, League of Legends, it's just going to be like, oh, whoa, all the frame rates.
All the frame rates.
We got them all right here. But sort of the problem is that Brad, was reviewing this card, and then he goes and looks at the actual price of the card right now. And it's $280.
And that is not what it's supposed to be at, as far as the MSRP.
The MSRP is supposed to be, I believe, $200 on the 1060, right?
Well,
it's supposed to be.
This is a 6 gig model, right?
Yeah, so it's $240, I think.
Right. So, and this is a custom cooler. So there are some factors there. But it's not like it's incredibly overclocked.
Yeah.
It's not really a card that should be as expensive as it is.
Yeah.
And yet there it is. When people want to go buy this, they're having to pay above and beyond what that suggested
Yeah.
price is. And we're going to get into that. So if you're watching now too on YouTube, I want to let you know, feel free to join in and let us know if you have comments, questions, whatever it is. We've got a diverse audience in here, it looks like, from Croatia and Egypt and somebody who says they're from South Yemen. So, but whatever it is, if you have some questions, please feel free to drop those in there as we go through and talk about why it is that GPU cards are so much more expensive and hard to find than they are supposed to be. So the MSRP for this GTX 1060 is higher. Now, let's get into that. Like, why do you think that is?
Well, let's run through like some of the prices we're seeing.
Okay.
And get like a little specific with it. So this is a $280 card.
Okay.
Right? And like I said, there's some
Suggested
mitigating things, but
yeah.
The thing is the GTX 1060 came out as a Founders Edition. That came out first. That was $250.
Mm-hmm.
Then now the MSRP for a base model is supposed to be $200.
Right.
So, when you're talking about adding another $80 over that, sort of base MSRP that everyone has in their heads as being like the price they get a 1060,
Mm-hmm.
that's really substantial. That's like almost a 50% increase. And we had some of our writers look into some of the prices, and also the RX 480 actually. Mm-hmm. Is a big offender in this regard. So,
offender, that's good. I like that.
So
the offender.
The 480, we looked at it and we gave it a really good review because it was supposed to be $200 for the base model, $230, $240 for the $230 MSRP for the 8GB model,
mm-hmm.
right? But what we're actually seeing online is that the 4GB model is between $230 and $260. The 8GB models between $260 to $270.
And this is across different retailers that you've been looking into this.
Yeah, we looked primarily at Newegg, Tiger Direct, Amazon,
mm-hmm.
and also Overclockers UK, which is a kind of a Newegg of the UK.
Of UK. Okay,
yeah,
so
our writer
common places where people would go.
Lives in the UK that did this, so he decided to look at that one too.
Okay. But so definitely far higher than what you would expect. Now, is that because of a lack of availability? Or why are we getting this pricing?
Well, it's sort of a supply chain thing. You know, that like Nvidia creates the GPU or AMD creates the GPU, and they pass it off to a board partner who, develops the card and puts the cooler on it, and they sell to a retailer who, and everywhere along the line here, there's a bit of a markup. That they're charging more to put their coolers on there and to overclock it and bin these cards, and Newegg is taking a chunk of it too. And one of the things that really stood out to me in the article is our writer talked to Overclockers UK, and they said they make about $40 or less per card sold. Like their profit margins on these cards are really thin. But even then, like $40 on top of the card is something that contributes when you're only looking at a $200 card.
Yeah.
Well, to be clear, I think that the $40 it was up to $40, so I would expect that to be like the top end card. I would expect the margins to be a little bit slimmer on these lower end cards, but it does. When we looked into it, it seems like it does really come down to the retailers.
Mm-hmm.
They get the cards at certain MSRP, but based on supply and demand, they're not barred from charging more for them. And so when they are in tight supply, they do charge more for them. And it's certainly, you can see that when you go and look at these cards, because the RX 480 is way more expensive than it should be.
Mm-hmm.
But it also can still be hard to find a card, especially that 4GB model.
Now, why is that? I mean, is it just that nobody's being able to anticipate the demand? Because clearly it's there for these cards. Or is it just too hard to overproduce? Because if you overproduce, then you have all the problems with that. Like, why is demand such a huge issue when it comes down to these?
Well,
supply rather.
It's been persistent.
Supply rather than demand.
It's been a persistent issue. Like this is a problem we've been dealing with for several generations now of video cards, and I think it comes down to video GPUs being hard to make. They're difficult to produce. So AMD and Nvidia, they are trying to remember the term, but they're designers. Okay, so they design chips, but they don't build chips.
Gotcha.
They don't have any production capacity. AMD sold it, spun it off into another company years ago now.
Okay.
So really, they come up with the designs. They go to companies that do build chips. They get contracts with them. They try to get the cutting edge designs, but this is why we just now are seeing them even go to a 14 nanometer or 16 nanometer process when they were stuck with those old 28 nanometer processes for so long. For I think it was 3 years, they were building the same production chips on the same production process. And it's because they have to get them built at a select small number of manufacturers.
Yeah.
And they have so much capacity, only have so much capacity, and they're using the technologies that they use, and they're in competition with everyone else who wants to build a chip. So there's just doesn't seem to be enough to go around.
Yeah. I mean, why can't that be fixed though? That seems like that's something that eventually that you'd work out. I mean, there's business to be had there. I guess I'm just having trouble seeing why that's such an obstacle that can't be overcome. But I guess regardless, that's what it is.
Well, part of it too, I know, is that not too technical, but at the base level, when they're producing those chips, there's also an issue of yield. And as they move to these new smaller technologies, it can be hard when they produce a chip. They have to run tests on it afterward and see if it works. And it can be harder to get these smaller processes. One of the reasons they weren't that it took them so long to get this is that they weren't getting good yields on the products they were producing.
Okay,
and it's not profitable to just keep making tons of chips,
right? If they're not
actually working,
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's also, again, it's really hard to build chips.
I think
and
maybe
it's really expensive.
Yeah.
Intel recently, they came out with 7th generation Core, right? It's not built on a smaller production process. They missed their target, basically. I mean, they kind of said their target's something different now, but they basically missed their target. Intel has its own fabs. They are cutting edge in fab technology by most measures, missed their target.
Still weren't able to do it.
And, it requires millions or billions of dollars to get these new production facilities online. And that just makes it very difficult to
There's a lot of hurdles
get more production on. It's not, it's not like you're building something on a plastic or something, and there's all these factories, and maybe it costs some millions of dollars to get it going. But if you want to build a chip, you have very few companies that have the knowledge to do it in the first place. And then they have to spend millions or billions of dollars to get the new production line ready.
Gotcha.
So it's very much just an issue of the production being so difficult to do. And I guess there probably is some overproduction thing, because if you are spending that much, you don't want to
have a bunch of leftover.
You can't really screw it up, if you mess up really badly, that's awful. So there's a lot of caution in how the chip production is put online. So
okay, well, I guess that does explain it actually a lot more for me, for somebody who doesn't, I didn't really understand how exactly complicated it is. So that explains, I guess, some of the lack of availability for the demand side of it, or for the supply side of it, excuse me. The pricing is still a little confusing just because everybody's taking a chunk, but obviously they're selling this at a profit. Nobody's going broke selling these things, or they wouldn't be doing it. And so they have this MSRP, which I would assume provides everybody a profit. If the supply companies were selling it at that, but yet it still gets marked up every time. And that's what the kind of the basis of this article is that just came out at digitaltrends.com today, as far as these GPUs are selling for way more than what the MSRP is.
Well, what we found really was that it's mostly retailers.
It's retailers that are just marking it up.
Yeah.
More than that, because they can get it, because people will pay it.
Yeah. Like the board partners, the video card partners that we talked to said that they're not getting anything extra off of this. They sell for what they sell for. And then they hand them over to the retailers, and the retailers do, what they want with them. So, some people are going to view that really negatively on the retailers. Some people are just going to see it as business. But
Yeah.
It really is business. It's a retailer thing.
Yeah, and so
Supply
if
and
people are going to
demand,
pay it, that's
so-
where it is. So so is this just something that we should expect? You should expect to pay over the price. You
Brad,
should expect to
you probably
overpay.
remember how much the cards were when they first came out. Like, it was even more ridiculous.
It was crazy. Like you couldn't find a 1080, and if you did, it was probably like $800+. I mean, that's
Yeah.
sort of how it's been. Like you said, the last few generations, I think part of the thing that's happening is that the CPUs are only incremental upgrades, and a lot of these cards are too. But I think a lot of PC gamers are in a position where they have their rig with like a third or fourth generation Intel Core processor, and that's still great. Like that's still just totally fine. But they've got to upgrade their card. So
Yeah.
people are you have a lot of people when these new generations come out that they're sort of sitting on an old card, or they've sold their card already in anticipation of it, and they're just like waiting for that card to come out. So when when that 1080, that 1070 actually drops, they're just like they will pay the price.
They'll pay whatever it is.
Yeah, and I know that was like a huge thing even before the 1080 came out, where all these posts online of people like, I've been playing on my old like 750 Ti, like please
Just
like
waiting and waiting and waiting.
release the card. Like
Yeah.
why can't I find one? So it's sort of the demand is really high when these come out because people have been really waiting for them, and that's the only thing, and that's the only thing keeping your rig from running smoothly. It's frustrating.
And I wouldn't get too harsh on the retailers because here's the thing, all right?
Okay.
Like we mentioned when the GTX 1080 first came out, people were selling them for $800, $900, even over $1,000.
Right.
And that's the thing, like the demand is so high for these that there's nothing stopping someone from buying it and just flipping it,
Yeah.
right? Like that.
I'm thinking
you
about
see
doing
that
that
all
right
the time
now.
when they first come out, right? Like the first month or so, like you see, it's just like when like VR headsets came out or a new console comes out. If it's like in limited supply,
New phone.
people will be like, the people who do the pre-orders, they'll pre-order two, and they'll have one for themselves, and they'll have another that they sell for $400 more on Amazon, because in today's internet market, anyone can go on Amazon, and if they have a card, they can sell it.
They
You
are
can
a
go on
retailer.
eBay. So the retailers, like they can't just be like, oh yeah, we're gonna adhere the MSRP and then I'll put a lid on it. Like people get savvy to that and they'll buy it and then they'll sell it again on Amazon for the higher price
That's
that
a good
people are
point.
willing to pay. So maybe the idea of the retailers keeping a cap on it would have worked like 20 years ago when we didn't have all of these really easily accessible ways for people to just resell stuff.
Of note, these sirens are real in the background, so just let everybody know.
Yes.
Can't do a show without sirens. But yeah, so that does explain a lot.
So, people see the opportunity and they make what they can of it.
Sure. Yeah, I'm thinking about it myself right now. But, all right. Well, with all of that in mind, so that does kind of explain why the prices are there. This is just what we can expect. Like, that's not going to change for a while, I would assume.
Yeah,
Expect to pay over.
I wouldn't expect.
Yeah, well, and one of the things we talked about too, even earlier today, was that if you look at an older card like a 750 Ti, that's still like $105. Like that's, that's pretty expensive for a card that basically will run Rocket League. Like, that's not a super competitive card with new features or anything like that. It's pretty low power, but these older cards are still expensive because new ones come out and it doesn't drop the price.
That is kind of also part of it, is that there's not like a reverse effect to this. Like things go over MSRP, but at the same time, it's pretty infrequent for the cards that then end up selling drastically under MSRP as they get older. Like they just kind of
because people still need them.
People still need them, or there's still people are looking for the one they can at the lowest price they can afford because they don't want to spend a lot. Or they just start going out of stock. Like the GTX 970 is really interesting right now. That's a card that used to be really, really popular. And it's kind of equivalent in performance to the 1060, right? So you can get some of them now for prices that are like equal to a higher end 1060. But some of them are $600.
Yeah.
And it's the same card, basically. It just depends on like what the stock is, what the card is, like what the retailer decided to do that day. It's all over the map right now. So, but long story short, you don't really see big discounts. like useful discounts after the cards get older.
Gotcha. Okay, so you're still gonna pay no matter what. That's
Yeah.
just the bottom line.
People always mention
wanna
that, like, they're like, oh, they're anticipating that price drop before the new cards come out.
Yeah.
It's like you're gonna save like $20 maybe.
Doesn't
Like you might find a good sale price, you know.
But at that point, what's the $20 extra at that point?
Right,
Like,
you're spending
if you need
$600,
it,
you know?
yeah. If you're already spending that much. Well, let's get into this a little bit more. And again, if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to pop in your questions there. We'll get to those. I know we've got a couple that we'll get to before the end of this episode. But that's the bottom line. So with the cards that are coming out now, we have the holidays coming up. Should you be buying a video card now, or should you wait? Let's talk about that. Where the market is right now.
I mean, I think things have settled a bit on these new generations. Like you said, there were $800,000 1080p or 1080s when it came out, and that's a little ridiculous. I think, to be frank, I wouldn't spend more than $600 or $700 on one of those. But I think the thing about it is that for most people, these two cards are going to be the right choice. We still find, I think, that people
the
GTX 1060 or the RX 480.
Okay.
Most people are still playing at 1080p. Both cards are very capable, and there are likely, I think, to be maybe some sales where you can get maybe the RX 480 for $200, $220, something like that. And maybe by Black Friday, we would see a couple more 1060s sitting at $200.
Okay.
Which is, I think, pretty much a sweet spot for budget gaming.
Yeah, I think that, now is starting to is a pretty good time to buy.
Right now.
So we mentioned like the GTX 1080 again. Like when it came out, it was like $800, $900, $1,000 on some of the resellers. Well, now you can get one on Amazon for $610. That's $10 over MSRP. $600 card. That's not gonna make you toss and turn at night. That's fine. And the pricing on the 1070 is getting pretty stable. There are low-end 1060s fairly regularly available for $200. The AMD cards are still pretty hard to find at MSRP though. But the stuff's probably going to settle out. It is a new generation, so it's usually good to jump on technology when the new generation comes out, right? Like
you'll be good for a while.
You want to buy the iPhone now when the new iPhone has come out. You don't want to wait until next August and then buy it, because that doesn't really get you anything.
Right.
Again, it's not going to be any cheaper. So yeah, it's going to be a better and better time to buy as we get closer to the holidays, I think. There's probably going to be, I guess the question is going to be, how good a time is it going to be? Because we know these are in short supply.
You're right.
And the holidays do increase demand. So,
and as we've seen, there's not a ton of supply out there.
I don't think we're not going to see prices go up, I don't think. But whether or not we see them go below MSRP on sale or not, I don't know. I think that's still kind of up in the air. Probably we will a few times.
Okay.
But it'll probably be a Black Friday sale where there's 5 available in the store.
Right.
Good luck, kids.
Okay.
So,
let me start getting in some of these questions here too. People are dropping in. One asks, what graphics card is good for 4K movies? Do you have a suggestion?
Anything?
Yeah.
Anything?
even
Any of
Intel
them?
integrated graphics.
Actually,
runs 4K movies.
yeah, a recent Intel CPU will be fine for 4K movies. They actually made that part of their pitch with the 7th generation. It's so good at 4K movies because they have built-in decode units.
So there you go.
Yeah.
And, and both of these cards do the RX, even the 460 and the GTX 1060 both support HDR.
Okay.
So
all right. So that's
a
good.
concern.
That's good to know. Let's see. What advice for first-time builder of a PC? This is Alan in here in the chat. I think you would be one of your compatriots who said he's going to throw his PS4 out the window once he builds his PC. So that's somebody. I think you probably got good guides at
Yeah, we do. We have
a
number of PC part guides, and I think we're going to be upgrading one of them pretty soon here, our budget PC guide.
Okay.
For some VR ready stuff. So yeah, I think it's a good time to be building a PC, definitely.
Okay. When is not a good time to build a PC, Brett?
Yeah, anytime's good to build a PC, I think.
All right. Let's see. Another question here. Isn't the GTX 1070 Nvidia's best seller right now, just like the 970 was their best seller of the last generation? I'm not sure as far as
Probably.
Yeah.
I'd assume so.
I mean, I haven't looked at the sales charts lately,
Yeah.
but I would expect it's doing well.
Yeah. Okay.
It is a little bit more expensive than the 970 was when it came out, though. So
Yeah.
I think that's disappointed a little bit of people, but I don't know. It's a good card.
Okay. All right. Well, bottom line, what are your favorite cards right now? Like, if you were to go out and buy one, would it be one of these two, or would you go to a higher end card?
Well, we kind of got into this last time we talked about the 480, and I still, after having spent time with both the RX 480 and the GTX 1060, I still think the RX 480 is my personal preference. I think the advantage of FreeSync monitors being cheaper than G-Sync monitors, as well as, again, I like the commitment to open standards like Vulkan and not using, using better DirectX 12 support. I think there's a lot of potential there. They're a little more expensive, but I don't know. You're going to be. I think it's worth it to not buy the most basic model. That's one other thing we didn't talk about. I think is that we're talking here about bare bones prices for like the most basic base clock reference cooler, and I think a lot of people prefer third party coolers. Although that sort of depends on your case setup. But I do think looking for overclocked cards is a good bet if you can get them at a better price. I've seen some good benefits from actual overclock cards that are real world gaming benefits. It's pretty important.
Yeah, overclocking can work or it cannot. The problem with overclocking is it's like you have to do a lot of little calculations in your head about like, am I getting more value for my money? Of the two, I would buy. I wouldn't buy either of these that are on the table right now.
Get them out of my sight.
I would buy the GTX 1060 3GB if I was looking in this price range, $200. The 3GB of RAM is a little slim, but you're probably going to run out of GPU performance before you run out of RAM. It pretty much fulfills that $200 promise of playing 1080p games. If I was getting one personally, I would get a GTX 1080 because that's the fastest.
And that's what you want.
So,
would you also what monitor do you play on usually? You don't play at 1080p.
I have a 1440p monitor right now,
so
with G-Sync. So
that's a consideration as well.
And I would like to upgrade to a 21:9 monitor at some point. So you got to get the
finally sold on that.
Got to get the fast. Yeah, for games anyway. So
I've been trying to push people towards the 21:9. I'm a big fan of the 3440 by 1440 panels for gaming. It's really sweet.
Yeah. All right. So
side note.
So Matt's saying go high end if you're gonna buy right now. Might as well.
I mean, it depends on what monitor you have, basically.
Right, your monitor and your budget, of course.
That's really the story. If you have a 1080p monitor, it's kind of ironic. If you have a 1080p monitor, you don't need to get the GTX 1080.
Okay.
Despite the similarity in the numbers, the 1080 is overkill. But if you've got a 1440p monitor or 4K, gotta get that 1080. So
I don't know what that look was that you just gave, but there it was. Okay.
Well, I think according to Steam stats, 0.1% of people have a 4K monitor.
Okay. I mean, we can pull it up, but it's like this. Yeah, the Steam hardware survey is always basically saying that the majority of people are playing on 1080p screens.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was 36.95% and growing of gamers are on 1080p, and then 25 at 1366 by 768. So
real quick question. We'll just do this. We'll throw this in here. What is overclocking? Somebody's asking if you can explain overclocking.
At a real basic level, the processors in these cards are running at a certain speed. They're completing some number of calculations per second, and you can raise the number of calculations per second that it does just by sort of telling it to run faster. And the way that works is sort of that these cards are binned, so they make them and then they test them and they see how fast they can run, and then they sort of scale them back and set them at a number below that.
Okay.
So it's sort of like an elevator. An elevator says there's 5,000 pounds or whatever, and it can probably be fine up until 8. But they sort of scale it back and they tell you, you run it any higher at your own risk. You can put 6 in here.
I wouldn't recommend overclocking your elevator, though.
No.
That's
keep it at its stated value there.
You can overclock everything nowadays, though. It's great.
A couple more questions, then we're going to go ahead and wrap up. So if you have anything, go ahead and pop that in there. When will these ultra-wide monitors, I guess this is kind of getting into monitors, but when will these ultra-wide monitors go over 100 hertz? Isn't it a DisplayPort issue? That is the question as it's written.
I've seen 2560 by 1080 screens go to 200 hertz on that Acer. So I don't believe the DisplayPort is a limiting factor at that point. But I have not seen. I've heard tell of 3440 by 1440 screens hitting 100 or 75. So
okay.
I don't think it's a DisplayPort cap though.
Okay.
I could be wrong about that.
All right. Well, there we go.
Yeah,
Got that
the
in there.
Asus Swift PG348Q 34-inch monitor has 3440 by 1440 resolution, 100 hertz.
Okay.
There you go.
All
It's
right.
probably about the max you're going to get over DisplayPort. I'm not sure though, but yeah, it basically, long story short, yeah, you can get up to the 100 hertz. That's pretty good.
All right. Well, if you have any follow-up questions, too, feel free to email them to us, podcast@digitaltrends.com, and I'll make sure they get to whoever can accurately answer what it is you have. And we also have a lot of guides at digitaltrends.com as well. So whatever you're looking for, whatever you're looking to do, like, for example, whoever was wanting to build their first PC, tons of guides on the website. You can go there and find that stuff. But always feel free to email podcast@digitaltrends.com. And this is our show, Close to the Metal. If you're just tuning in right now, if you've been listening the whole time, you already know that. But we do this every week. So if you have suggestions for a topic, we usually kind of go in with one topic, and we'll go in deep with that. Let us know. You know, we really appreciate the feedback. We like hearing from you guys. There's an audio version of this podcast. Guys, do you have any final comments on the cards? Just get ready for probably buy now, according to Matt. Buy your card now.
Yeah, go ahead and buy
Prices
one
may
if the price looks
stabilize.
right.
Okay, prices may stabilize towards the holidays a little bit.
Yeah.
Go down a little bit.
Maybe.
Okay. So look to get it soon. That's probably the right idea. All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in. Like we said, there's an audio version of this podcast, so you can subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever. Feel free to email podcast@digitaltrends.com. Thanks so much. We'll be back next week with another episode.